The idea that one can be forgiven of sins is dependent on the idea of a merciful God. A God who knows what is right and just, administers punishment or reward as is appropriate, but can be swayed toward leniency, whether by pleas of the guilty or by his own generous and considered discretion. The only thing in the entire universe that we know to have these traits, those of discretion, generosity, and mercy, are humans, us. Nothing else in nature or in natural processes exhibits these characteristics. Nature and the cosmos follow what we call a law, a prescribed course which is ever-present and undeniable. Material systems follow a compulsion for survival, sustenance, and replication. When an animal devours its prey or uproots its flora, when a plant imbibes the nutrients and water from the soil, when an insect dismantles a decomposing organism, when water dissolves a substance and the earth swallows a continent, when lava spews from the depths, reshaping the planet, and lightning sets ablaze a dry and dying forest, when one celestial body annihilates another, and a supermassive black hole consumes a galaxy. In the midst of these natural mandates, there is no mercy, no generosity, no discretion, no forgiveness. There is only process, the natural order at work. If these traits, those of discretion, generosity, and mercy then, are only found in humans, and we attribute these traits also to God, the Supreme Being, the All-Father, then we are anthropomorphizing God. We are declaring in no uncertain terms that God is like man, like us. There is more than one undesirable and illogical deduction from this line of reason, that there is a God who shares man's capacity for discretion, generosity, and mercy. If God, the creative source of the universe, what the founders of the ancient peace traditions referred to as the One Law, has the ability to exercise latitude and discretion, swaying between considered consequences, depending on, say, mood or persuasion, or allegiances to certain chosen peoples, or just plain boredom. If the All-Father can choose when and where to meet justice, to what degree, and based on shifting criteria, then there would be no justice in the world, no absolute right or wrong, no consistency of outcomes, no predictability to natural processes, no systematic execution of cosmic laws. This is one downside to having a merciful God. It would mean that being in God's favor would work to your advantage, that whoever prayed the loudest, or fasted the longest, or offered the best sacrifice would receive the most mercy, that impressing God the most would be the goal in life, regardless of how sincere we were, or how kind we were, or how pious we were. And if the point of our life in the mortal coil is for us to advance in our personal evolution as beings toward oneness with all creation, which is what the ancients taught over the past several millennia, then the concept of a merciful God would give us an escape hatch, the hope that our adverse actions would not cause adverse consequences, that we would avoid paying the price for our misdeeds, that the errant and harmful things which we said would go unpunished, that the misguided and destructive thoughts in our mind would not manifest illness and dis-ease in our body. The argument is often that God is merciful because He loves us. But if God truly loved us, He would allow us to suffer our indulgences so that we might learn from them, facilitating our personal evolution by the experience of consequence, that the punishment would fit the crime, so to speak. It is from the permissiveness of authority that sin takes root, and even an anthropomorphic God would know this. Forgiveness is a luxury. God, the creator of nature and the cosmos, who gives in just proportion to all things that which is needed for sustenance, health, and growth, who initiated the life cycle of birth and death, who assigned seasons to all things, is absolute in His justice. There is no example of luxury in nature. All things take as they require, and give back in equal measure, no more, no less. In this way, creation maintains balance and equanimity, stasis and order. And God, the All-Father, the Creator, who set the natural order in place, does so with even-handed objectivity, impartiality, and fairness, the basis for divine wisdom. In the body, there is no forgiveness. The body follows the natural order. It obeys cosmic certainties. When you ingest what the body does not require, your body suffers the consequences, whether that be excessive weight gain, imbalanced chemical systems, upset stomach or bowels, nausea, vomiting, blood glucose spikes, or any host of other maladies. You can pray for forgiveness from poor or unfortunate food, beverage, and/or substance choices, but the body addresses these according to natural processes and is not subject to prayer. If you are able to avoid the just consequences of improper dietary choices, which is not likely, then there is always a natural reason for this anomaly. In the emotions, there is no forgiveness. The emotions are subject to thoughts and chemical processes within the body. They follow a natural order and obey cosmic certainties. When you allow your thoughts to be centered in self, to ruminate on misfortune and harmful external influences, seated in your lower self, that part of you most connected to your base instincts, your emotions suffer the consequences. This could be manifested as an imbalance in your physical systems, chemically or otherwise, the release of stress hormones weakening your immune system and making you susceptible to every form of ailment, or cognitive degeneration into helplessness and paranoia, among other emotional maladies. You can pray for forgiveness from the consequences of errant and destructive feelings, but the emotions regulate these according to natural processes. They are dictated by the state of your body and that of your mind. They are not subject to prayer. If you are able to avoid the just consequences of improper thought processes affecting your chemistry, which is not likely, then there is always a natural reason for this anomaly. In the mind, there is no forgiveness. The mind is subject to thoughts and chemical processes within the body, as are the emotions, as previously discussed. There is a part of the mind which transcends the body, what we call one's higher self, but due to its entangled state with the body while incarnate, what we call one's lower self, the mind follows a natural order and obeys cosmic certainties. When you allow your thoughts to focus on small, petty, hurtful, and damaging things, and you do not challenge and stimulate your higher thinking processes, your mind suffers the consequences. This results in a base state of existence, underdeveloped mental processes, limited cognitive abilities, and manifests as unwise and unwarranted behaviors, a skewed sense of right and wrong, and flawed lines of logic, among other mental maladies. You can pray for forgiveness from the consequences of unhealthy mental processes, but the mind operates according to natural processes. It is subject to the influences in your environment, many of which can be avoided and/or are of our own devise. The thoughts in your mind are the result of stimuli to which you are exposed, or to which you expose yourself. They respond in kind and are affected by these stimuli, whether for better or for worse. They are not subject to prayer. If you are able to avoid the just consequences of unhealthy mental processes, which is not likely, then there is a natural reason for this anomaly. If you eat in an unhealthy way, the body will respond in kind. If you harbor unhealthy chemistry, your emotions will respond in kind. If you hold unhealthy thoughts, the mind will respond in kind. If you stand in the way of a speeding car, you will likely be bludgeoned. If you step from the apex of a skyscraper, you will likely fall to your death. If you are dragged to the depths of the sea, you will likely drown. There is no seeking forgiveness. One's actions have consequences. Mercies are not a part of the natural order. Adverse actions have adverse consequences. Healthful actions have healthful consequences. This is the epitome of God's justice, steadfastness, and love. It renders predictable, measured results for our actions and those of all other things in the universe. We would never be able to make sense of a universe within which mercy was a force of nature. We would not be able to evolve as beings if there was an opt-out at our disposal, a way of circumventing our just deserts, or those of all other cosmic, geologic, and biologic systems. We are the result of our genetic and epigenetic heritage. This is God's love incarnate. We are the result of our thoughts. This is God's divine righteousness. We are the result of our emotions. This is God's unfailing patience. We are the result of our actions. This is God's undying sense of justice. From our own failings and challenges we are gifted righteous consequences, which we are tasked with overcoming, and from which we must emerge to discover the path of peace, the conduit of our own personal evolution toward communion with the one law, the All-Father. Forgiveness is not a trait of God, because it is unjust. It is unfair. It is undeserved. A just and fair God does not forgive. He teaches, he redirects, he loves, he encourages, he cautions. But he does not forgive. Forgiveness is a trait of man, but only because we have the capacity for discretion, for generosity, for mercy. We have been gifted the capacity for choice, to have a sense of right and wrong, and the liberty to choose compassion. God is not like us in this way. Showing leniency to one is showing cruelty to another, and God knows this. In this way, God shows love by not showing forgiveness. Granting exception makes some exceptional, and others despised. If this were the operating mode of the God of the universe, then all things would inherently be unfair, unbalanced, and partial to one being over another. This is not universal justice, nor is it divine love. Man has the latitude to exercise forgiveness because he is not God. God has no means of or inclination toward forgiveness, for mercy, for discretion. Now that we have addressed the concept of forgiveness, as it applies to God and to man, we can tackle the concept of sin. The two concepts are inextricably intertwined, as one cannot exist without the other. We have presented the limitations of forgiveness where God is concerned, that it is not a trait the Creator can manifest, due to his role as the one law, singular and immutable, from which all things emerge and through which all things are sustained. God must remain impartial, just, and consistent for the universe to thrive, to grow, to continue its course with any sense of order. A forgiving God is a weak, ineffective, and impotent God. Man can forgive because he has a survivalist nature, wherein relationships and strategic alliances serve him, and wherein mercy shows power. This dynamic is restricted to the realm of man, because man does not dictate the laws of physics. The natural order is not responsible for the evolution of all beings toward oneness with all creation, and has the capacity to deviate from the one law. God is the one law, by definition, and cannot deviate. If God cannot forgive, or at least would not if he could, yet man can, then what is sin, and how does it relate to God and to man? Sin, according to the ancients, is a misguided word. Sin, according to religious tradition, is when a person commits an act which God has deemed against his will. Depending on your culture, location, and position along the historical timeline, among other factors, sin could have a variety of contexts and be defined in a variety of ways. There are as many proposed sins as there are stars in the heavens, and no one discipline agrees as to their breadth and depth, though there are a few crossovers which tend to be considered universal moral principles, such as "thou shalt not kill" and "thou shalt not commit adultery," etc. Even good atheists would likely agree that these are sound ideas, just from the perspective of getting along and maintaining basic human rights and avoiding moral turpitude. The ancients did not use the term sin in this highly religious context, but instead referred to unhealthy practices of mind, emotions, and body as deviations. The difference between terms boils down to this: a sin is something God told you not to do, which you did anyway, which you should feel guilty about, and about which you should pray for divine mercy and forgiveness, regardless of how remorseful you actually may or may not feel about committing the act itself, and how likely you are to commit that act again. Deviation means that you know there is a true path, that you got off course, that you correct your course, and continue down the path, which leads to health and peace. In the former, guilt and shame are built-in components. This is because in this scenario there is an anthropomorphic God who is disappointed in you and who might have pity if you pray hard enough. In the latter, guilt and shame are optional, because they do not correct your behaviors in and of themselves, and there is no human-like being in the clouds who cares how you feel about your poor choices. You either made healthy and peaceful choices, or you didn't. Either way, you'll reap the consequences of those behaviors. And if you don't like those consequences, maybe you'll change your behaviors. The word for repent in the original Hebrew meant literally to turn about or change course. It is not a directive to feel any sort of way. It is a call to correct your course. Again, feeling bad about your poor choices is optional, and often part and parcel of realizing you've done something harmful, whether to yourself or to others. And that's okay. But it's not mandatory to the application of corrective behaviors. If praying about correcting your behaviors brings you some sense of peace, some feeling of making restitution, and also brings a sense of power over your situation, then there is certainly no harm in that. But the only forgiveness one can actually realize, where the natural order is concerned, is in correcting errant thoughts, words, and deeds. This is not the direct result of praying, but the manifested consequence of living with intention, of being mindful, and of discipline in one's actions and behaviors. If prayer gets you there, then more power to it. But it should serve as a support system, not as the action plan. Prayer can be helpful with introspection and contemplation, but it doesn't put food in bellies, clothes on backs, or roofs over heads. The best miracle is one that stems from a change of heart, a change of mind, and a change of action toward a world more loving, more patient, more kind, more understanding, more giving. Either everything is a miracle or nothing is. You can't have both. All things are natural. There is no supernatural. There is material and immaterial, but not magical and mystical. God, the Creator, the All-Father, is the source of all things manifest and unmanifest. He is the most natural thing there is, because nature emerged from His will. What we refer to as the natural might better be labeled supernatural, because it came from the most fundamental state of nature, the immaterial, the abstract, the mind of God. All things are of a natural origin, and things that happen are the result of natural processes. This means that anything which happens could happen, and anything that can happen cannot be a miracle, by definition, as it is a result of natural processes. Whether we understand these processes or not. If something is a miracle, then one is saying that thing could not happen, but it did, making it a miracle. But if it couldn't happen, then it wouldn't have happened, because anything that does happen can happen. Meaning, it is possible, and if it is possible, it is not a miracle. In this way, forgiveness, which is not an aspect of God, whether by function or design, is unique to mankind, and sins, which are the religious connotation of the ancient concept of deviation, are not forgiven by grace, but corrected by intention. These two intertwined concepts are at once misunderstood and comprehensible. Forgiveness is disputed and sin is diluted. What is more powerful, one's ability to self-correct, learning from their mistakes, through repentance from deviation, or from praying for divine mercy, that one can mess up, ask God for forgiveness, then go on their merry way? The former resulting from strength of will, learning from one's mistakes, and correcting their thoughts, words, and deeds, or the latter wherein one hopes for the Creator, the progenitor of nature and all natural processes, to change the rules of the game, avoiding just and deserved consequences for errant behaviors, by means of showing whimsical and arbitrary favor, or as the result of skillful and manipulative persuasion. The ancients thought the answer was clear, that the wisdom of the one law was consistent with their understanding of the forces of nature and the cosmos as having a singular and immutable fundamental construct. And while this may be a luxury which man can employ and enjoy to his own benefit and to the benefit of others, through God, the All-Father, the Creator, the Source, there is no such luxury as the forgiveness of sins.